Isabel Gonzalez is a reporter for the Lair, New Mexico, and writes for Mid Major Madness, which is hosted by SB Nation. Welcome on to the show, Isabel. How's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
Really, really good. Really looking forward to this chat. We chatted last year, right at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was
Yeah.
kind of a somber chat in terms of what we were talking about. There was no sports going on. We didn't know how long COVID was going to occur. This time, it seems like things are a lot better. So, since our last conversation, I just wanted to get your overall thoughts in terms of yourself. How has it been covering just college hoops overall? I know that's a big statement, but if you can just summarize in terms of just you personally yourself of covering the athletes from basically last year in regards to the tournament being canceled to now actually having a March Madness tournament, what has it been for you?
Well, like you said, it's the complete opposite of the last time we talked. It's been interesting because obviously none of us have really experienced anything like this before. But you kind of just adjust. Everything's just virtual now. So you don't get to do the same stuff as before where it would be, you would go to practices and you would get to just see the guys and then talk to them, even like small talk. Right now, everything's through Zoom, which you kind of just get used to after a while. But honestly, for me personally, I'm just grateful that I got to cover it because going from no sports to something, like you kind of just, you take what you can. Um, so I was happy I got to cover the Lobos again. And with the NCAA tournament, that was really cool. It was actually my very first time covering it fully. And of course, it was different as like any other experience would be because everything was through Zoom. But you still feel like you get to know a lot of people like that because you're constantly going to like pre-game press conferences and then post-game press conferences and then just random ones during the week. So it's been fun. It's interesting. It's convenient because you get to be, at home and you just, switch your tab and then you're in another meeting. But it's been interesting.
So, Matt and I, we live in New Mexico, and Isabel covers the New Mexico Lobos. So, forgive for a little bit of the local talk, but we got to discuss what's going on with the Lobos basketball team, and specifically the hiring of Richard Pitino as the next head coach. But before we get to him, I kind of want to recap Paul Weir's tenure as the head coach of the Lobos. I remember when he got hired, and Matt and I were on this text thread with some of our friends who went to New Mexico, and I remember one of them just stating like he was really excited for Paul Weir because he was the head coach for the Aggies, New Mexico State Aggies, and he was successful there, and he's going to bring that to the Lobos, and it seems like it didn't work out. So can you kind of tell the listeners and viewers what went wrong with Paul Weir's tenure with the Lobos?
To be honest, I feel like a lot of it, he was just very unlucky with a lot of the stuff that happened because, you had that one year where like Lyle was going to be, the star player and he ended up getting injured right before the season started. And then with the whole cotton bag thing, like a lot of that stuff with those two players who got suspended, um, that's something that was not on the court sort of thing. And it's something that took forever to kind of get resolved. So for him, a lot of things that I mean, yeah, sure, he could control some of it, but a lot of it he couldn't. And even this year, honestly, with the pandemic, um, I've talked to a lot of former Lobos and just other players, and they said that it really does matter when you have your own practice area, when you get to go shoot around whenever you can, whenever you can fit it in, and just sleeping in your own bed. So Paul Weir had a very difficult challenge this year. Not only was his roster, very young, but also just the whole pandemic thing. Like that's something nobody could have planned for. So I think he's a great guy. I feel like a lot of things we didn't really get to see what a normal year would have been for him. But now I feel like okay, well he's gone, and I feel like New Mexico fans just needed energy again, like new energy, just a fresh start. So I love Paul Weir. I think he's a nice guy, but yeah, now it's time to start over.
So now I guess we can dive into Richard Pitino, Justin, unless you wanted to dig into Paul Weir's tenure a little bit more. But go ahead.
Yeah, just one more question. Just considering what it's just the weird circumstances of this season, do you think they should have just given Paul Weir another year, just considering this insane season? I mean, I correct me if I'm wrong, Isabel, but I believe they played maybe one game at the pit, or I mean, very sparingly there, or not at all. Oh, geez. Okay, so
Yeah, not at
I,
all.
So, I mean, they're playing in a completely, foreign place this regular season. Granted, their record was terrible, but still, I mean, they had a lot of challenges. Do you think it was just the pressure from the fan base? I mean, the fans are brutal here in New Mexico. That they want excellence. Do you think it was the situation that's appeasing those fans, or do you think it just cut some guys some slack due to this season just being completely bonkers and insane in terms of all the circumstances the players and the coaches had to go through?
Yeah, me personally, I think it would have been good for him to get that extra year just because this was such a crazy year that he couldn't control anything. And they got to practice a couple of times at the pit, but most of the time they were not here, they were somewhere else. And I remember when they were in Texas at first, they were sharing that court with, obviously the teams there, but also like the volleyball team. So their practice time was very limited. They could go and practice, but they didn't have that extra time of like, okay, you can go lift now, you can go shoot around. So that obviously is something that you need if you have a lot of like freshmen and sophomores, and even just transfer guys. You need to adjust to like Paul Weir's system, and he uses the pit a lot. Like as you know, guys run up and down the stairs, and they have routines. So I feel like those routines were obviously very interrupted. The women's team got to play 2 games here, but the guys didn't. So, me personally, I feel like he should have probably gotten another year. But I've also had talks with like other media members and just other people involved in the program, and a lot of it also comes down to just like fan excitement because at the end of the day, it is kind of a business. So they weren't sure how to bring the fans kind of back. Like sure, some of them were like, yeah, I'll support Paul Weird, and some others were just like, oh man, the program hasn't been good. So it goes back to that whole fresh start. It gets people excited again. But me personally, another year. But at the end of the day, that's kind of how it went.
No, I agree with you, Isabel. And I mean, last year, and Justin, from our group chat, like I was referring to the Lobos as the Lubbock Lobos. It really, it's demoralizing to be playing out of state. Any way you slice it, I mean, it's going to be full of distractions, as you mentioned. You're not sleeping in your own bed, like you said. That affects the team. What do you get the sense was about? I mean, I know you mentioned, and I think it's a fair point. That we need to bring excitement back to the fan base. I think a lot of schools could relate, given just the fallout after the pandemic and all that. I think everyone is kind of in that place to an extent. But do you think the fans were maybe more understanding of Paul Weir and the struggles that he had last year compared to maybe like another coach? I think of like when I'm going to date myself here, but when Richie McKay was kind of pushed out of the Lobo coaching job, and there was kind of, there's always anger and excitement and passion around the Lobos, which is part of what makes them such a great team to follow. But do you think there was more understanding for Paul Weir or some resentment from the fans with his situation? How do you think that went down?
I think the major factor there was that it wasn't his first season, or his second. It was his fourth. So I think a lot of it came down to that. It was a couple disappointed seasons. The first one was he more than met expectations. It was like very surprising at the end. But then second and third, there were a couple things that just didn't go right towards middle end of the season. So because of that, I feel like fans were a little bit less likely to kind of cut him some slack. Not because this year wasn't difficult, but just because after a couple years with the program, they felt that he needed to have developed something a little bit more. Even honestly, like with the young guys, they said, well, as a coach, you're supposed to develop players, So if there was a lot of roster changes and stuff, that in a way it comes down to him. And even motivating guys, there was a lot of like, obviously the guys were going to be kind of more stressed out, just traveling everywhere and stuff. But just getting the guys to really buy in, I feel like a lot of the times fans didn't really know what was going on with the team. So they wanted Power to motivate the team a little bit more because a lot of times they looked just very tired and defeated. So it came down to, okay, other years didn't go as well and this year didn't go well. So at what point do we end this?
Gotcha. Isabel, I want to kind of talk about what Richard Pitino is going to bring to the Lobos. He comes in with a lot of fanfare. I noticed in his press conference, he reminded me a lot of Steve Alford in the same charisma. Even on Twitter, people were comparing him to Steve Alford in terms of kind of similar circumstances at previous colleges they coached at.
Came from the Big Ten. Yeah.
So what's your opinion of him? And then is there an ultimate fear that this could turn into another Alfred situation? I never forget the press conference when Alfred moved to UCLA, and the media members were questioning him in regards to, he wasn't able to get the job done and going to the Sweet 16, and he felt like, the media members and the fans were kind of ungrateful. It's like, I won you a bunch of conference titles, I did this and did that. And I guess my main question is, does Richard Pitino know, like, a conference title and regular season or the tournament, it's not going to get it done, that basically it's the Sweet 16 or bust? I mean, does he understand kind of that ramification, or do you think he has that old school mindset of just winning conference championships?
I think he knows what Lobo fans are like. I feel like everyone in the nation kind of knows New Mexico is a basketball state, like no matter what. And of course, his dad obviously can mentor him a lot, and he's talked to other coaches like Mark Few, who obviously took Gonzaga from just a tiny little school to like what they are right now. So he does have all those people around him that are probably going to advise him in the best possible way, and he probably understands that yes, Mountain West is good, but during that first press conference, that introductory press conference, he talked about winning. Like he knows that New Mexico fans want to win. They want to be on the map. And he reminds me a lot of Coach Gonzalez, the football coach, Danny Gonzalez. They both know what New Mexico fans are like, and they know that they have to really push hard. They have to go above expectations if they want to, keep everyone happy.
And go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to ask real quick, do you think having the name Pitino is more of a blessing or a curse for him coming into this situation? I go both ways on this.
Yeah, that's how I feel, because of course there's always like, oh man, there's high expectations, but at the same time, like maybe it's good. I feel like he embraces those high expectations. And it's funny because he started like a little rivalry with his dad, like, oh, he's afraid of coming to the pit. So he's taking it very lightly, he's just like playing around with it. He's trying not to get that pressure get to him, and I'm sure he's used to it by now. So like I said, good and bad.
What do you think he's going to bring in terms of recruits? Do you think he's more of a coach that's going to focus on outside talent from the state of New Mexico, or do you think he might focus on some of the rising prospects within the state of New Mexico? Because I remember with Alford, one of his greatest strengths was, taking a lot of the players that was already recruited by the previous coach and really maximizing their talent. And then eventually he got his own guys on the team. So what do you think Pitino is going to bring in regards to recruiting?
What was interesting about just seeing Pitino during that introductory press conference was that he hadn't really talked to the players yet. He talked to the players right after that press conference. And obviously things happen very quickly, so it's not good or bad. It's just how it went. So I saw him just approaching them very casually, asking them where they're from and everything. And a couple players were in there. They were out of town for like spring break and stuff. So right now he's gotten a little bit more time to talk to those guys, see if they'll be a good fit. But he made sure he told everyone that not because he didn't recruit them meant he didn't want them. So I think he is trying to keep some of those guys. He, like a Jamalawatch would be such a great guy to have come back. I don't know how likely that is, but I'm sure he's aiming for that. You have Byron Matos, who has a lot of potential, as a big. So I think he's going to try to get some of those guys. And Eddie Nunez said that this coach that he was going to hire was going to be all about developing talent. Because with Paul Weir, there was a lot of, changes, like guys coming and going. So I think now they're focusing on that, like, hey, we want to develop guys. So we either keep the ones we have or we get the right guys that are going to grow with our program. Because at the end of the day, it is more difficult if you're just getting, a transfer guy and then someone else transfers. And if your roster keeps changing every year, it's hard to get your identity to really stick, and even the culture.
Isabel, I want to shift gears and focus on the NCAA tournament as a whole. And there were several different aspects of the tournament that stood out to me. And one was the disparity with the women's tournament and the men's tournament. And I just want to get your thoughts in terms of the beginning story of the weight room controversy to the national title game, in which the women's title game averaged more ratings and was like the most watched women's title game since 2014, while the men's ratings dipped. And I want to make clear that I think the men had higher ratings, but I guess the women saw a bigger increase in ratings than the men's tournament. So what was your overall thoughts of just both tournaments overall, and moving forward, post-pandemic era, do you think we might see that disparity decrease in terms of attention for the women's tournament, and also just in terms of opportunities for those female athletes as well?
Well, first of all, I think it's very unfortunate that even though we've known about these issues for so long, that they hadn't really done much about it. Because this is not anything new. I feel like all of us kind of knew stuff like that was happening. But the fact that it took a player to really show how different they were being treated, that's very sad. Because it wasn't a surprise. I think we all knew the women's teams, sometimes they don't get as much support, and a lot of the times is people are like, oh well, people don't watch them as much. It's like, well, why would you can't really watch them as much if they don't get as much attention, as much TV time. Even sometimes like on their social media accounts, like some people, some schools don't even really have SIDs just devoted to them. So that's very sad. And I hope, since this tournament really, it was shining a light on it a lot more, I hope that does change. For the next tournament, I hope that doesn't happen anymore. That would be really sad, because it means, they didn't learn the lesson, and it took other people to kind of like step in and be like, hey, NCAA, like we can help you. But, at the end of the day, it was their job. And it's really cool because I actually love that. I don't cover women's basketball as much, just because I ended up going more on the men's track. But I was watching that game, that championship game, and it was so much fun. Women's basketball is really cool because obviously they're very talented, but also they go back to a lot of the basics for basketball, like just their technique and stuff. So it's a more pure sort of basketball sometimes, and I enjoyed it. So I hope those ratings keep going up. I hope they keep getting that support, and they should be treated equal.
Isabel, I want to ask you about a story that could be a huge story for the state of New Mexico, and something that I didn't know about until way later, and I felt kind of embarrassed because we actually had I think the founder of the basketball tournament on our show last summer, and I realized that New Mexico is getting their own team. So I was like, holy smokes. And then I saw the conference call with all the players on there. I was like, oh man, it's on now with all these guys agreeing to be on this team. So can you shed some light as to, what was the genesis of this, and then how the team is progressing now, just with the pandemic, travel's more difficult. Like, basically, take us behind the curtain in terms of how this the basketball tournament representation from New Mexico first got started.
So obviously, New Mexico fans, like, they follow their alumni everywhere. They cheer on them in the NBA, overseas. They're always so happy for them. So it was kind of a no-brainer to have this happen. It just, nobody had really done it. But Brandon Mason, if you know him, he just talks to everyone. He's the friendliest person ever. So he was in contact with all these guys. Like, they have a million group chats where they just joke around about whatever. And he had all this extra time. So he was like, hey, you know what? New Mexico deserves this. Mason loves the state of New Mexico. So he thought, hey, why don't we do a New Mexico alumni team? And it wasn't just, Lobos, but a couple Aggies as well. But that's kind of how it came together. He was like, hey, why not? Like, I can do this. I have everyone's number. Might as well just text them. So it's kind of how it started. He just texted people, and everyone was so excited because even like Anthony Mathis, he left to a bigger conference, and playing with the Ducks, of course, that was really fun for him. But when he talked about fans, he kept referring back to Lobo fans. He said that was the best he's ever seen, just when it comes to fans and arenas and energy. So all of those guys kind of felt the same when I talked to them. I was like, yeah, of course I want to play for Lobo fans again. It's an easy choice. And right now with the pandemic, of course, they couldn't just meet. And a lot of them have contracts overseas, and they're doing a lot of stuff. So they were going to wait a little bit longer, till this summer to kind of get together. But they do talk, of course. They have their group chats. They were going to create a bigger group chat just so everyone got to know each other, because some of those guys never played together. But yeah, it's all, they all kind of already have that tie, which is, their love for the game and the love for just New Mexico overall. So yeah, that's how they're going to proceed. They're going to keep talking to each other, and yeah.
What is that going to be like, Lobos and the Aggies teaming up? It's like cats and dogs being friends. So that's just
Yeah.
a weird concept of them teaming up. How has that been so far?
At first, the name was going to be Lobo Alumni Team because there was a rule with the TBT where you had to have a certain percentage or a certain number of players from that specific school. But after a while, I think Mason was like, wait, we don't just have Lobos, so let's just do New Mexico team. And now it's the Enchantment team, so they can represent that entire state as a whole. And I think the guys seem pretty happy. It's mostly Lobos, so of course there's going to be a little bit of like a rivalry there, but not really. After all, they're all a team, and I think they're all going to be just excited to play in a state where there's not that many professional teams. So they're just going to have all the fans come together, and that's going to be cool because it's a lot about fan support. As you know, with the TBT, it's all about like social media and fan votes.
So do you think these guys, and I realize it's fairly early, but we were talking earlier in terms of specifically the Lobos not having the greatest history in the NCAA tournament, is part of these players' motivation like capturing some unfinished business, like, hey, this is a little bit of a path for redemption? It's the big elephant in the room in terms of New Mexico basketball of not getting to, the Sweet 16. And, advancing in the TBT could be some redemption for that. Have the players really talked about that, or they're not making that connection yet? It's kind of too early.
I haven't heard that, but that's a very interesting point, and I'm sure they kind of see it like that. When I talked to them, it was about just proving the entire state that they could do it, because it was a lot of just love for the fans, because when they're here, they're like celebrities. They'll go to a grocery store and like someone will stop them like, hey, I saw your game last night. Great job. So they kind of were saying it was for them. It was like, hey, they supported us so much. We want that again. We want them to be cheering on us again. And we want them to know that we can put New Mexico on the map when it comes to basketball. And of course, there's going to be NMSU and UNM represented, but I think it is more of like the fans as a whole and the entire state of New Mexico just paying back that support a little bit. And like, hey, this is for you. Like NCAA tournament or not, like they probably just think about it as a whole. Plus the money.
Gotcha. Of course, the money's going to be a huge factor. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be incredible for the state, and hopefully it gets the publicity that it deserves. I think that's my only concern, since the tournament's kind of like not an underground, but even like basketball friends of mine have never even heard of the TBT. So that's my only fear, that it won't get that publicity like that first year, even if they do make a run. Because I think these guys deserve a lot of hype and support from the community, no matter how well they do. I think they deserve that. So hopefully that does go down.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think Mason knows that. So when I ended up helping with that announcement video, so he understands this very well. Even when he was with the Lobos, he knew the importance of just social media for recruiting and even just for fan support to come to games. So that's not really a concern for me. Like I know Mason's going to try to get it done, and they got like a couple of weeks ago, they got new social media people to help them with graphics and videos. So they're taking this very seriously. They're trying to get the word out, and they're trying to have, good content, just quality content, and try to get people excited. They even tease things a little bit, even their social media stuff. Like they've been teasing that a lot. So I think they'll do well. And New Mexico fans are already super excited, so hopefully that just translates in the summer.
Isabel, final question, and then we'll let you go. This is something that happened recently in terms of a law that was passed in New Mexico in regards to name and likeness of college athletes. And this is going to be a big issue in college sports in the United States, but this is happening here July 1st, in terms of athletes actually being able to earn income off their name, image, and likeness. It would make New Mexico and Florida the first to enact this law. So do you have any opinions of this law in regards to the student athletes, specifically on the basketball side of things? Do you think it's going to really change anything in terms of maybe even Richard Pitino's first season, or do you think it's too early? Have you heard of this law, and do you have any initial thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure how it's going to change, with Pitino and stuff, because obviously since it hasn't been done before,
sure.
It's hard to tell how it's really going to affect the roster. But I do agree with it. I think the players put in so much work that it's kind of unfair that their own image doesn't belong to them. So, like, one thing's like the salary stuff, and then like that you could argue a little bit more yes or no. But when it comes to like using your own name and like making money because of your own person, it is unfair that someone else ends up owning that, because people are making the argument like, well, if you're a musician and you get a music scholarship for a school, you can still write your own songs and you can get paid somewhere else. So why can't athletes do that? And in the end, like, it's kind of their job. Like, they work out all the time. They have to eat right. They have to, like, this year they had to, be in their own bubbles. So they deserve some of it. If you're popular, why should your school get everything? You should get some of it.
I agree, and especially now with the internet, that's a game changer because a lot of these athletes can have names before they even enter going into college. From maybe having their own YouTube channel to having their own highlights to being popular on Twitter or any other social media platform. So I think this is awesome to see. I'm just wondering, do you think it's going to affect recruiting? I know it's fairly early. I mean, we don't know how this law is going to have too much of an effect, but if you can, I guess, predict as best you can, if this goes well, could this be a positive in terms of attracting recruits? Just because, hey, they can come here and make that extra money off their name and likeness compared to maybe a bigger college, but that source of revenue is cut off. Coming to New Mexico, there's that opportunity to make that money off your name and likeness playing for the Lobos compared to any other college.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I don't know all the specifics of how it's going to work, but obviously that would be huge because if you're a player who already has developed a name, yeah, like, why wouldn't you come to a program where, first of all, you will probably be the main guy, like, if you are a star and you come here, you're going to be an even bigger star. You're going to be a god in New Mexico, and then you get paid for it. Like, that would be exciting. So I think it could help there. And I think the only maybe more difficult thing for, like, Pitino would be just make sure they stay focused on the game. But at the end of the day, you already have, like, guys with big social media following and stuff. So it's not like those guys are not used to the attention. So it's going to be interesting. I'm really excited to see what next season's going to look like.
I got one more question for you, Isabel. We recently saw the transfer rules change and eligibility change for players. Now players can transfer year-round, and they have instant eligibility at their new schools. How do you think that's going to affect the landscape of college basketball? And also, is this a potential benefit or advantage for New Mexico as a team with a new coach coming in?
I think the important part of, like, Pitino's job will be kind of like what Nunez said. Like, it's all about development, because with those rules, I think, yeah, of course, players are going to be able to just go anywhere, and they have the right to. They should have the right to just do whatever is best for them in their future. But if Pitino can, develop a culture and want guys to actually stay here and just stay in one program like the whole 4 years, that'll be pretty big. So it's gonna be an interesting rule. But in the NBA, you have a lot of that as well. Like, you'll have players 1 week in one team and then the next they're wearing a different jersey. So it's gonna take a little bit of adjustment. And it's gonna be difficult just to develop the playing style, the identity of teams with so many people changing. But I think after a while it'll just be a little bit more stable, and coaches are just gonna have to focus on their own culture and, trying to get guys to stay there. Because Gonzaga was successful because of that. Mark Few is known for developing players, and the coaching staff, like, he likes consistency. And I think that does help with, success. But yeah, you do have a chance of getting, better players too. So.
Isabel, thank you very much for coming on to the show. Please let our listeners and viewers know where they can find you on social media, and also where else they can also find your work as well.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at @CIsabelG. And my work is at thelairnm.com. Also, SB Nation's Mid-Major Madness and USA Today's Mountain West Wire. So yeah, go ahead and check all of that out. I do a lot of college basketball and a little bit of NBA stuff with, like, Mountain West alumni. So follow me on Twitter and you can see all of that.
Awesome, Isabel. Thank you very much for coming on to the show. Really appreciate the chat. We'll definitely have you on, especially when the TBT takes place. Love to get your opinions and just we'll see what happens with that. I'm really excited to see where that goes this year.
Oh, for sure. That'll be a lot of fun. And I'm constantly talking to Mason about what's going on there and stuff. So yeah, it'll be cool to just see how that goes.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Isabel.
Awesome. Thank you, Isabel.